everyone, it's Alana and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here to share my May wrap up with you all. Now, I know I'm a little bit late with this one, but better late than never, right? And also this will be a good tool to keep track of what I actually read. I know on my Instagram I do share monthly wrap-ups where I give like a little spiel of what I thought about a book, but this will just be a nice reminder of what I read in what month and what I thought about it. It'll also be more of like a discussion type thing rather than just, hey, I read this. So even though we're halfway through June already, I don't know where the time's gone. I have no idea what is happening, but that's fine. Just freaking out a little inside. Anyway, back to why we're here. I read 7 books in the month of May and I had a really good reading month. Usually I average around about 5 books a month, which is still pretty good for me. I work near full-time hours as well as doing all my Instagram stuff on the side, so I feel like 5 books is goals at this point. But the last couple of months I've had really solid reading months where I've read over that, so anything over 5 and I am very proud of myself. So this month, yes, I read 7 books, and while the majority of those were fantasy, there were actually a couple that weren't, and there are also a couple of books in there that really surprised me and are now some of my favorite books of all time. So we're going to delve into that now and I'm going to share all my thoughts with you. Don't worry, this video is spoiler free. I'm just here to give you my opinions on these books. They might differ from your opinions if you've read these books, or if you want to read these books, this might help you out as well. So I'm just going to get stuck into this video. Here we go. So the first book I read in May was The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This book is an amazing standalone. It is a fictional representation of the lives of the elite in Hollywood and what they have to do in order to get to the top. This book follows a girl called Monique Grant who has been requested by Hollywood celebrity Evelyn Hugo to do a tell-all interview. Now everyone is confused when Monique gets requested because she's not very well known in the interview circles, so when she gets this it's sort of like her big break and no one really knows why, but this book goes along to tell you all about the 7 husbands of Evelyn Hugo and also who she loved the most. And this is just an amazingly crafted book and I love it. At its heart, this book is a love story, but it gets a bit dark at times and it shows you how constructed the life is of a celebrity, and I loved it for that. I loved it for the look into Hollywood and into what it is to be famous and the sacrifices you have to make and all of that. Evelyn Hugo in this book reminded me of the woman in The Devil Wears Prada, played by Meryl Streep. She had that vibe about her. She was amazing. She was a go-getter. She knew what she wanted. And this book is all about her successes, but it's also about some of her deepest regrets ever in her career and the people that she hurt along the way. And I love how it's got this two-tone narrative of, well, fuck it, I'd do it all again, but here are some things that I regret from my experiences. One of my favorite parts about this book was the bisexual representation in it. I think it is done so well and so naturally. It shows the difference between being bi, being gay, and being straight, and I think it's done really well. It's just amazing. So I could go on all day about how amazing this book is. Basically, the hype was definitely worth it and you need to read it now if you haven't read it. And now I think I'm going to go on a Taylor Jenkins Reid bender because I need to read everything that she has published now. The second book that I read in the month of May was Whisper of the Tide by Sarah Tolsa. This is book 2 in the Song of the Current duology. I'm not sure if that's the name of the duology, but that's the name of the first book. And the first book looks something like this. In book 1, we follow the main character called Caro, or at least that's how I pronounce it. It's C-A-R-O, so and this book is full of small gods, large gods, high sea adventures, and waiting for one's fate to come and find you, or whether you go out and find your own fate. And I loved it. There's a real political plot going on in this book and it's amazing. I think I gave this book 4 stars when I read it last year, and the follow-up Whisper of the Tides also got 4 stars because it's a fun read and it's really well crafted. The plot doesn't drag, it's full of adventure, the main character isn't annoying, and for YA that's a really crucial element for me when I read it, and I loved it. So when I say this one's really well crafted, it's told through a way where at the beginning we get like, he has nearly present time, and then it goes back over a span of 3 months earlier, and we see how the main character ended up where she was at the start, and then it goes chronologically up to that point. And I really enjoyed that because at the start you're like, why is she talking to this person after what happened in book 1? And it was just a great way to construct a book, and I really loved that for it. I also loved the characters in this. I loved the myth that we got in it because we got more myth, and I'm here for that. I also love how the main character didn't rely on anyone else to get shit done. She went out, she did it herself, she had to think for herself and use her own means. Carol is amazing. I love her. These books had depth, but they were nothing mind-blowingly deep, but it was still a really, really fun read. And for YA fantasy, it was really, really good. So if you're after something fun, pick up this first book, which is shiny, and be ready for an adventurous tale full of gods, water adventure, spoiled royals, character arcs, all of that good stuff. The third book I read in May was Arch Enemies by Marissa Meyer. This is book 2 in, I want to say, the Renegades trilogy. I'm really bad at knowing what trilogies are called because sometimes they're just called like the Hunger Games or whatnot, and other times they're called weird shit like the Chaos Walking trilogy when that's not the names of any of the books. One of my favorite series though, go read that. So as I said, this is book 2. The first book is obviously called Renegades. In this one we follow a character called Nova, who is part of the anarchists who are cast and set up as the bad guys, and you have the good faction of superheroes called Renegades. This is a superhero packed story with lots of powers, aliases, good and bad, evil, and all of that, but it delves so much deeper into what would happen if the world ended up being run by superheroes and the pros and cons of that. Now with book 1, I liked book 1. I think I went in super hyped up and it met my expectations, but there was something just a little bit like, yeah, like I liked it, but I wouldn't give it 5 stars. I think I gave it 3.5 or 4 stars, which is still a really good rating. But then I picked up Arch Enemies, and this one for me blew the discussion wide open and I loved it. The plot goes further, we get more from the characters, we get more conflict, we don't know what side to be on even more, because even though it's set up as good and bad, we have a protagonist who is part of the bad group and who wants to change things, but also can see some of the positives from the good group as well as some of the negatives of their rule. And yeah, I just love this. I love anything with superpowers. I love anything with dual perspectives. And then this we hear from Nova as well as the other leading character, Adrian. They both have different aliases. So Nova has her Renegades alias as well as her Anarchist alias, and then we also have Adrian who has his Renegades alias, and he also has another like anti-hero alias thing going on, because in book 1 he begins to see some of the faults with the Renegades, but he's still a renegade at heart. So basically we have 2 main characters in this trilogy so far that are super duper conflicted with where they are at and who they are joined to, but who are still at heart part of their particular groups, and I loved it. I love that it challenges the messages. These books are also super diverse, and that is refreshing, and I can't wait for the third book, which comes out, I don't know when. We all should know by now that I'm shit at remembering release dates, but I think it's soon. It may be next year, don't quote me, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure it's called Supernova, and I want to see what happens, and I need to know what happens now. The fourth book I read in May was The Smoke Thieves by Sally Green. This was slated as a YA take on Game of Thrones sort of thing, and I can see where they're going with that. Like there's multiple plot lines and there's heaps of characters, and then they all sort of start to join together and interconnect. In this one we follow a princess, a soldier, a hunter, a traitor, and a thief. I think I gave this one 4 stars or 4.5. For YA fantasy, it was pretty good. I'm interested to see where it goes in book 2. I would love to learn more about the demons, because in this one, people hunt demons for the smoke that comes out of them when they die, and then they sell that on the black market because it gives you some sort of high. But yeah, we start out following the young thief Tash, who is currently in the process of hunting down a demon to collect the smoke, and then the world takes off from there, and we start to realize all the political aspects that are going on this. We find out about the 2 warring nations and a royal bastard and a young princess who doesn't have any power but learns that maybe she could have power, and I really liked it. This is also the first book of Sally Green's that I've read, and I am keen to try some more stuff from hers. I know she's got the Half Bad trilogy. I don't really know what that's about, but I've seen some people over on Instagram highly recommend it. So I might have to give that a try next. The 5th book I read in May was The Golden Fall by Robin Hobb. This is the 2nd book in the 3rd trilogy in Robin Hobb's multiverse thing that she's got going on. I know that's a bit of a mouthful, but I'm slowly working my way through her series. Her multiverse is sort of broken up into different trilogies, stacked on top of each other and happening in different parts of the world, and this trilogy is part of the Tawny Man trilogy, and is also when some of the characters from different parts of the world begin to meet up, which I found really, really interesting. So I can't tell you much about this one because it is part of the 3rd trilogy in the multiverse. I can tell you that there is a lot of court intrigue and political plot lines and a really interesting magic system with people who are witted, which means they can talk to animals, which is shunned in this world and society, and people who are skilled, which means that they can telepathically link minds with someone else from long distances or change ideas of another person. It's pretty cool. I love this magic system. It's unique, and Robin Hobb just really knows high fantasy. So if you love political plot lines and some pretty good character arcs, pick up The Assassin's Apprentice, because that is actually book 1 in the trilogies, and start off with that because that's where it all kicks off, and then you can end up at this trilogy where I'm up to. I'll just show you what I mean by like she's got this multiverse thing happening just to freak you out by if you do start with the 1st book. I don't know if you can see, I hope you can, but 1st trilogy, 2nd trilogy, 3rd trilogy, 4th, and then we get like 4 books, and then her writing underneath a different name, and I'm not sure if they're connected. I assume they're not because it's under a different name, but this is what we're working with, and I'm only up to here. I'm maybe halfway through the multiverse. I don't think I'm even halfway. Maybe that's wishful thinking, but it is what it is. So yeah, I think I rated this one 4.5 stars. It was really, really good. I love it. I love Robin Hobb's writing style. When you get into her writing style, it is amazing, and I highly recommend her. The 6th book I read in May was Sadie by Courtney Summers. This book is something that I don't usually read. I don't usually read crime thrillers, but holy shit, if you have not heard of this book, you need to pick it up. This is told really, really cool through 2 different perspectives. In this one, we follow Sadie, who is the older sister of a young girl who's been murdered, and we follow her on her revenge quest to find and hunt down her sister's killer. The other perspective that we get is from Wes McCrae, who runs a podcast called The Girls, and who is also a journalist, and his sections are told through a podcast-like script, which is really cool, and it breaks it up a bit. And I just loved how we follow him and then we get Sadie's interpretation of events. So he is trying to track her down, essentially, and we get where he's been and who he's caught up with, usually one step behind Sadie herself. This book was just phenomenal. Like, if all thrillers were like this, I would read thrillers as a genre more. I will put out there though that there are trigger warnings for this. There are trigger warnings for sexual abuse, for violence, for a whole bunch of things which I can't think of right now. So if you're more of a sensitive reader, please be aware of that going into this, because there are some hard-hitting parts to this story, and the ending of this book is one of the best endings I've read in a long time, and it had me on the edge of my seat. So if you haven't heard of this, go Google it, see what you think, but I highly recommend this one. So I think I might have given this one 5 stars as well, or was it 4.5? I can't remember. It was really, really good. And the final book I read in May was The Near Witch by V.E. Schwab. This is actually Schwab's debut novel, which went out of print, and then since her success and all her other books that people love, it has come back into print. So I think it's really cool that we, as fans of hers or as an audience, can go back and see what started off her career, because I tried to buy this book when it was out of print before it came back in, and you couldn't find it anywhere. Not that I checked secondhand sites or anything like that, but it was hard to find, so there's that. In this one, we follow a young girl called Lexi in the town of Near, where there are no strangers, and then one day kids start to go missing and a stranger also appears at the same time, and it goes through why the kids are missing, where are they, who's doing it, is it the stranger or is it someone else, and it was a good first book. I think I gave this one 3.5 stars. It wasn't my favorite Schwab book, but I could still appreciate how good it was for a first novel. Schwab herself has described this book as quiet and spooky in in a time when all the books being published were loud and in your face and full on, and I think that's the best way to describe it. I really enjoyed this world and I enjoyed the characters, but it was quieter and more drawn out than what some of her later books are, but no one does world building quite like Schwab, and she created something different and interesting, and I'm still glad that I read this. So there you have it. Those are the 7 books that I read in May. Once again, sorry that this wrap up is a little bit late, and by a little bit I mean like nearly a month. It is what it is, it's fine. I want to try and record all of my monthly wrap ups just because I love watching other people's monthly wrap ups to see what they read and what they thought of what they read, and whether I should read those books too, because I'm always on the hunt for more books to buy and read and consume and all of that. So thank you again for stopping by. If you've read any of these books, I'd love to know what you think, or if you have a book recommendation for me, drop it in the comments below and I'll check that out. I'm always here for more books, essentially. I hope you have a great day out there, and I will catch you next time. See ya!